Hey, what's up? It's Comic95, the Savior. So for this video, I want to, clarify something that I've talked about in the past on my blog as well as on my YouTube channel, and give some advice for those of you that are either working in Japan or that plan to work in Japan. So, I want to debunk this myth that the job market or teaching market in Japan is oversaturated and how it's hard to find a job, etc., etc. So to give you an idea of just how untrue that is and really how easy it is to find a job, unlike in America, for careers even, it's so not competitive, uncompetitive, not even sure what word I should be using for this. You can easily apply for a job and get that job within a week, if not even the same day. This is unheard of in America. In America, even our retail positions are competitive. And whenever I tell Japanese people this, they can't believe that. You can easily apply for a job at Walmart, McDonald's, or Starbucks, and it can take as long as a month or two before you even get a call back to schedule an interview. This is no guarantee that you've even gotten the job, no guarantee that you actually get an interview, them just calling and telling you, hey, we got your application, basically. You oftentimes don't even hear back from the majority of places that you apply to, regardless of what your past experience is, and all of that just for the pay to be minimum wage. So, with that said and done, Japan is the total opposite. Whether you are applying for a retail job or for, something that's going to be a career for you, it doesn't just have to be teaching, it can be an IT job, etc. You will generally hear back from the employer within a day, no longer than a week. Normally, if it takes them more than a week, they're not hiring and not interested in you for whatever reason. But with that said and done, you can easily narrow it down. Not to mention, I would say for, every place that you apply, I would say anywhere between 8 to 9 out of 10 of the applications that you fill out, you will get a reply back as long as you match the description of what they're looking for. Whereas in America, you can be down to a T, everything they want inside, their job description. You have the experience, you have the skills, your resume is great, and they still won't get back to you because they have far too many applicants. Someone else's application stood out better, yours didn't have the keywords that they were searching through, etc. There's endless possibilities for reasons why. So once again, to also help you understand that, in Japan, it's very common for retail places like grocery stores, fast food restaurants, like even McDonald's, to actually have the manager's phone number listed at the table telling you that they're hiring. They're actually understaffed at these places. But we are not talking about working retail jobs, we're talking about teaching in Japan. And with that said, I want to use myself as an example. So I've actually worked more jobs in Japan than I've had in America. Even although I've spent most of my life living in America, I'm a native English speaker, I'm from America, and I have most of my experience unprofessionally from the US. Whereas in Japan, I was quickly able to find work, quickly able to get hired, and I've gotten so many job offers within short periods of time that instead of me being desperate saying, yes, I'll take the $8.25 an hour, yes, I'll work weekends, now it's where I can debate and I can negotiate and say, well, this other, company, they offered me $5 more per hour and they gave me 7 more vacation days. And, I know you're going to reimburse my train fare, but can you pay for my rent too? Like now I can negotiate things a lot better versus in the US. So long story short, I want to say that that is not true. It is somewhat true, but it's not true and it is true. So I really want to call it a white lie. And I will explain why it is a white lie. So the reason why it is a white lie is, yes, there are more people that have been moving to Japan thanks to pornography, yellow fever increasing, and of course with the Olympics coming up and anime now becoming more mainstream. Back in the day, anime and even porn wasn't so big of a thing because, well, the internet hadn't really developed the way that it has. And we only had one channel that kind of showed it, which was, Cartoon Network's Toonami. We only had a few different TV shows. Not a lot of people read manga, and now it's cool to do these things. So I know a lot of young people like to hold on to it being some type of nerdy subculture. But now pretty much everyone knows what anime is, and everyone has watched, seen it, heard it, listened to Japanese music, etc. So it's not so much of an underground thing like how it used to be. More people are becoming interested in moving to Japan with the hopes of starting a life here, whether it's because they have yellow fever or they want to live out some type of fetishized dream or whatever the case is. They're coming here. So there are more people to compete with when you fill out an application, and that can make it more difficult to get a job. However, the reality that people do not talk about, this only really complicates things in Tokyo, and even then, you have to keep in mind that while there are more foreigners coming to Japan, if you look at the statistics, there's actually significantly more Asian foreigners in Japan than there are those that are, from America or from parts of Europe in which English is their first language. With that said, if you are not a native English speaker, most places will not be interested in hiring you. Is it impossible to get a job? No. Most of the people that are working in Japan, excuse me, I just spit all over the place. Most of the people that are working in Japan, they're not native English speakers. And so with that said, obviously there's room for people who aren't native English speakers too, but considering the fact that most of the people that found my channel and that are watching my videos, you are probably from the US or some other English speaking country. Thus, those problems or issues do not apply to you. So you are still inside of a category and league of your own. There is always going to be a huge demand for not just native speakers, but specifically and preferably those that come from the United States, since you have the preferred English accent. Now, taking it a step further, this is the reason why I told you guys that it's very important that you distinguish yourself. Now, ultimately, you can get a job simply by being attractive and young, even if you're a European girl that doesn't speak English as her first language. Or, of course, if you happen to be a European man, woman, etc., and you're attractive. You don't need to have a degree to teach in Japan. A degree is a requirement that immigration has in order for you to get a work visa. But what I do want to, let you guys know is, like I said, you being a native English speaker and you having a relevant degree is what will set you apart from other people. Most of the people that do come to Japan, while it is a stereotype, it's true, they've come here to quickly, get hitched, have a sham marriage. They came here because they don't have a relevant degree and they couldn't find a, job or career within their field. They went into something that no longer exists or that, has a diminishing market. Like there isn't as much of a need for people to work in that field anymore. Or beyond just that, you can have a degree, be qualified, but if you're a bad interviewer, you have a weird personality, you lack experience, that can still stop you from getting a job. It's always a catch-22. You need experience to get experience, you need experience to get the job type thing. Well, Japan is kind of no different. So, with that said, if you come over to Japan, you don't have a degree, you don't have a relevant degree, and you lack experience, you are going to be in for it because now you're competing against people that do have degrees in relevant, topics or relevant fields to teaching, and those that are younger than you, and those that are more attractive than you, etc. Should your looks matter? No. But this is not America, and while there's no written rule about this, it's extremely obvious as you start applying for jobs. If you have not experienced an employer referring to your looks and calling you attractive, it's probably because you're ugly, because it happens all the time. Trust me. People will comment on your age, your looks, etc. As I've said before, you can easily get a job solely based off of the fact that you are cute, as far as part-time jobs go in particular, but even with, career-like jobs such as teaching, IT, office jobs, etc. So, what I want to get at as far as the white lie goes, because it is more competitive, aka there's more people here trying to work and live in Japan, they have lowered the salary. So teachers, particularly in Tokyo, don't get paid as much money anymore. Why? Because they know you're going to quit and go home anyway, and you're probably not really a great teacher. So they figure why pay you more when you're willing to work for this amount too. They'll continue to lower it as more people come over to Japan to teach and as more people tend to quit within a short period of time. They see no need to pay people more. It's unfair, it's a crap excuse, and it's stereotyping because it's throwing all foreigners together. But with that said, I do also understand because why pay someone who doesn't have a relevant degree more money than they really deserve? But my point is, if you're in Tokyo, the average salary, as I've talked about before, is generally only between $2,000 to $2,200. On the higher end, you can get $2,500 before taxes, but that's pretty much as high as it's going to go for you in Tokyo. And they do that on purpose because, once again, that's where most foreigners want to work and live in Japan, and because there's so many people applying for a job there, it helps narrow it down. Why pay more than what you have to? Just using common sense as a business. Also, keep in mind that while they do also lower the pay, there's a lot more people that want that same job because there are limited teaching jobs. It's not as limited as people make it sound like online, but there isn't an infinite amount of schools in Japan. So for one teaching position, they might be doing as many as 40, 50, 60 interviews, which is still nothing in comparison to the applications that you would probably have to go through in America. Well, in Japan, out of those applicants, generally a large portion of them are people that don't even live in Japan, aren't native speakers, don't have degrees, and are just married to someone that's Japanese, or they're married to another Asian who's here, overseas on some type of visa for business, etc. So this does narrow down the application pool for, the employer, thus making it easy for you. But once again, once it gets down to the nitty gritty, down to just a couple of you guys, if your degree isn't something like business, psychology, it can be in education and not in the, relevant field. For example, if you're teaching young kids, but your degree is, in secondary education, they're going to choose, obviously, the teacher with elementary or whatever, degree that teacher has. You really want to consider this before you come to Japan, before you start trying to look for a job. So my point is, no, the market is not saturated where there's no jobs and you're going to struggle, but there are a lot more applicants. So the pay is going to be lower. And when it comes down to it, even if you do have some qualifications, your experience alone is not going to be enough. You need experience with a degree and things that you can't change, like your country of origin and the place that you received your education. I want to go into more detail about that too. I get a lot of emails, and every once in a while I get a, comment from someone who's not a native speaker that'll ask me like, or I even read it on other forums too, in which people will ask, or they'll state that they're really passionate about teaching English and they've been studying English for so long and blah, 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 and that they went to school in some English country or they have a British passport. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how old are you? Let me explain this to you, okay? I mean, this in the nicest way possible. Nobody cares. It's not going to help you here. Going to school in the UK means nothing when you're not British. And the reality is, while Brits are definitely a very close second to being an American in Japan, it's still not preferred in the fact that you're not even a native speaker and your grammar is so bad in the sentence that you wrote trying to explain how passionate you are about being an English teacher, you can quickly be taken out of the application pool just by your horrible writing skills. This is another reason why a lot of employers ask for your resume. This is not just to get an idea of what your educational background is and your work experience, but I can tell by reading your resume what your first language is. Now, I mean, not literally. I don't know if you speak Spanish or if you speak whatever, but I can tell whether you grew up in an English-speaking household in which that was the first language. I oftentimes get really weird and robotic stuff. So either I can tell that you use Google Translate, you paid someone to, do this for you, or, beyond just that, I can tell that you're ignorant and you are a native English speaker. I see a lot of people, when I look through resumes, that use slang, that use improper grammar, improper English. And it's not like where it's just a typo. You guys have seen my writing. I make mistakes all the time on my blog, mostly from me typing very fast. And my blog is an amateur blog. I'm literally typing to you as I'm talking to a friend. It's not professional writing. But when you're writing, making a resume, creating that should be pretty close to that. There's so many grammatical errors and so much unprofessional information listed inside of a lot of people's resumes. Now, don't get me wrong, the standards for hiring in Japan are rock bottom low. And because you're generally dealing with people who are not native speakers that are reading and looking over your resume and probably just care about your picture and what country you came from and the fact that you have a degree or work visa, they'll overlook this stuff. But if your application gets into the hands of the wrong person or a smart person, they will look at it and be like, yeah, this isn't a native speaker, or not only is this not a native speaker, but this person can't even write in English properly, which I would imagine that's much easier than speaking in English properly. And then beyond just that, for those of you that are native speakers, I can tell whether you have a degree or your intelligence by how you write. If you are so ignorant and so stupid that you're not self-aware enough to realize that this is not a professional resume, or that you shouldn't be listing the fact that you worked at Chuck E. Cheese when you were 13 years old on your resume, or you're listing babysitting jobs or fake contacts, and which you shouldn't even have references on your resume, might I add, but I'll get into that stuff later. I'm pretty sure I made a blog post on this. You're telling on yourself. So Long story short, you need to, brush up your resume. It would be nice if you don't already have a degree that you study something that is relevant and that you try to get, certification in things that can help you get a job. But long story short, being passionate about teaching English is not enough to get a job in Japan. You can have an employer that's desperate enough that will hire you regardless, but the reality is nobody cares about your dream of teaching in Japan, because we all know you don't have a dream of teaching in Japan. You have a dream of getting a visa for Japan, and you realize that teaching is the only job that you can do. And if you're not a native speaker, you're also aware that this is probably the only job that you can do. So you're desperately looking for work, and it shows. And I'm not trying to throw shade at you or judge you, I understand. But my point is, your employer will not be impressed by this. They've heard and seen the same story a million times. And especially if your dream is to live in Tokyo, good luck. Because the reality is, most places are going to underpay you. Because not only, are you in the worst city possible to work, but you're not even a native speaker. And once again, for those of you that are native speakers, even if you get a degree that's relevant, you're competing against people that, have more experience than you and that have even higher degrees than you. I actually lost out on a job against somebody that had, I don't remember if it was a master's or a doctorate degree, and I'm still in school and I'm working on, that. But I was so upset. I'm like, oh, come on. And so to be honest, I think they really chose the other teacher for different reasons. It was a white guy, and sure enough, I actually shared this, I believe, on Twitter. They messaged me back trying to offer me the job. I was like, nope, ain't nobody's plan B. You should have hired me the first time. But you'll come across situations like that all the time. Do also keep in mind, and don't feel discouraged, just as there are a lot of people coming to Japan for work, to get married, for school, etc., there's also tons of people that are quitting and leaving Japan too. For example, those that run out of money, those that get homesick, those that get divorced, etc. So there are always openings coming up all throughout the year. You do not have to apply for a job just in January or just in April. You can get a job year-round in Japan. It is significantly easier to find work between January to about March, but in actuality, you can really find a job any time of year in Japan, because teachers are always quitting, they're always getting fired, people are always getting divorced, etc. And no matter where you are in Japan, even in Tokyo, native English speakers are in demand, and they are what is wanted. Do keep in mind though, if you do choose a major city such as Tokyo, the ball is in the employer's court. They have way more native speakers to choose from than you could ever imagine. And with that said, while you think that you're a great teacher, while you think that because you're pretty or because you have a relevant degree it's going to get you the job, it'll help you and it'll, put you above someone else that doesn't have a relevant degree. But there are plenty of other people that also do. So this may or may not actually get you the job. It will help you get an interview, but they will be a lot stricter and a lot harder with, how they choose, because they have a lot more applicants to pick from. Versus if you're somewhere further out in Japan, further south, further north, there are a lot more, positions that are available that also have difficulty, with them filling them, because there aren't as many teachers to choose from. And once again, a lot of the teachers outside of Tokyo, they're not native speakers. So there's also less competition the further away from Tokyo you go. So there's higher pay, there's less competition, and that's enough within itself, and the cost of living is less. So those are like 3, 4, however many reasons for you to not teach in Tokyo. So once again, I know I sound like I'm speaking from both sides of my mouth, so I'll just summarize it again. You can find work in Tokyo. It is not hard to find work. You can and will get interviews within a week of applying for a job, if not within 24 hours. It is not hard to land an interview. What can be difficult is for you to actually get the job, in particular for those of you that lack experience, that don't have relevant degrees, and that are not young and are not attractive. It's unfair, I know, but this is real life, and this is how it really works and really goes. Do you have to be cute to get a job here? Absolutely not. Do you have to have a degree to get a job here? Absolutely not. Do you have to have a relevant degree? Absolutely not. But that is another thing that people seem to misunderstand. While yes, having a degree is a requirement from immigration, it's also what people normally request for schools. Schools here are not stupid. They obviously want somebody that has experience, that is educated to teach, because they have to introduce you to the parents. and education is taken very seriously in Japan. They don't want some random white guy that's just married to a Japanese chick, because now they have to come up with a, oh hey, he's a native speaker, he's from Canada type story. So, and of course they'll do this, but obviously they would rather have the, blonde-haired, blue-eyed American that actually has a master's in education and is a native speaker and young. So you see what I mean? You're making yourself more marketable. It's easier to sell yourself if you actually come here with relevancy and you have the look, the age, whatever. There's certain things that you cannot change about yourself, and I totally understand that, but I just wanted to debunk that myth. It is not oversaturated, it's not impossible or even hard to find a job. It is hard to find a high-paying job, in particular in Tokyo, especially if you don't have a degree. If you come here with a degree, you come here with experience, or you're willing to work to gain some experience, you most certainly can and will easily be able to find several jobs and get employed with ease. It is not as hard as you are thinking. I will say that if you are not a native speaker, it is significantly harder to get a job in Japan that is full-time and that will actually sponsor a work visa for you. I have other videos that talk about that, but long story short, it doesn't really make any sense for someone to sponsor a work visa for someone who's not a native speaker when they can sponsor a visa for someone who is. It's unfair, I know, I'm sorry. I'm just telling you the way that it really works and what the preference is. If you are someone from one of the major, 5 English-speaking countries such as Australia, the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, etc., you're good to go. But again, do keep in mind that Americans from the United States will always be the preference for most schools, regardless of your appearance, although some don't care. There are, of course, some schools that will hire a girl that is from Australia or New Zealand or Canada over an American, simply because the person looks better, or maybe they have, higher qualifications, or maybe it is a British school. There are British schools here in Japan. Not all schools here cater to American English, but 99.9% of them do. It's kind of hard to find a British school or an Australian English school. Even those that plan to go and study in Australia or the UK, they would obviously prefer an American accent or for an American to teach them, because most of the business in the world is done using American English. Most people have been taught American English, and most of the media that people watch and listen to around the world comes from America. People watch our movies, they listen to our music, they watch our streaming, whatever, Netflix, Hulu, etc. Yes, I'm aware that, they have versions of this in other countries, but even YouTube, the platform that you're watching me on right now, it's American. Google, American. Facebook, American. Instagram, American. Everything that you use is from the US. So whether you like it or not, that's kind of a big reason why American English is preferred. It's kind of the standard of what's used, not to mention, to my knowledge, there are more English speakers from America than I believe anywhere else in the world, native speakers. Otherwise, of course, I think maybe India or China will win that, because a lot of them do, learn English and are bilingual, etc. So, not going to get off into all of that. All I have to say is, don't be afraid. You will be able to find a job here. Even if you lack qualifications, it'll be a little difficult for you to get started. But all I want to say is don't be fooled, though. While, your degree is something that, immigration requires of you, employers also say that they prefer that too. So obviously, they're going to choose the teacher that has a degree, like most of them do, over the one who's just married to some random Japanese chick. Do not play or fool yourself. And again, I don't recommend getting a degree in anything teaching related if you aren't really passionate about being a teacher, because you're paying for it. And if you decide that you don't like Japan, you're going to have to go back home and find a way to use your degree. So if you don't really like working with people, don't really like working with kids, I would not sign up for, $80,000 plus in debt, to get student loans to come here for a degree that's useless to you. I've always wanted to be a teacher since I was a little girl. You can ask my parents. It's always been my dream. I did not change this to come to Japan. If I were to go back to America, I would still want to be a teacher. In fact, sometimes I feel like I'd rather teach there. So this is my dream. If this is not your dream, I won't say I don't recommend it, but I would say for you to really think about this, because you're putting yourself in debt. And even if you're not putting yourself in debt, you're spending your own hard-earned money and time. You cannot get your time back. You might be able to make your money back, but you cannot get your time back. You will age, you will get older, and you will die. Are you going to be satisfied with the fact that you spent 4+ years going to school to learn something that you have no interest in doing long term? What if you don't like Japan? Like I said, I was a lot happier when I first came here, and the more time I spent in Japan, the more things I found that I didn't really like. And I still love Japan as a country, but I don't like it as much as I did when I first came here. And I have plenty of, I've had plenty of moments, and I still do, where I question, do I really want to stay in Japan? Do I want to go back home? And if you're human, like anyone else, you're probably going to do the same thing. And the reality is, most people don't just probably, think about it, but they do, and they ultimately choose to go back home. So this is a permanent decision somewhat. Your degree is, for life. And while it's still helpful and useful, I wouldn't recommend getting a degree in something that you're not passionate about, because it's your money, your time. So pray about it, think about it on your own. Just don't let the fear of not being able to find a job scare you from coming to Japan. If you really want to work here, you can make it happen, even if you're not a native speaker. I have blog posts and, playlists that are on these topics, so you can watch those and read them if you have more questions in regards to this. Otherwise, if you have a question that I did not already answer in this video or another video or blog post, please leave a comment down below and I will try my best to answer that question. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, and if you have not already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and I have a Snapchat and Facebook page as well. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.